Before we dive into this story, please consider subscribing to my channel, turning on the notification button, and letting me know where you're watching from in the comments section below. Amaka sat on the edge of her luxurious king-size bed, her silk robe draped loosely over her shoulders. The bedroom, with its gold accents and plush carpets, was the epitome of wealth and elegance. Yet, despite the opulence, a heavy emptiness lingered in her heart. At 33, Amaka had everything most women could only dream of. A handsome husband, Peter, who was a successful businessman, and a life filled with grand parties, expensive vacations, and admiration from their social circle. But what she didn't have was the one thing she craved the most: connection. Peter, now 40, was everything Amaka had prayed for when she decided to settle down. He was wealthy, charming, and respectful. Their wedding was a grand affair, and their honeymoon in Paris was filled with luxurious dinners and breathtaking sights. Yet, behind the scenes, cracks began to show from the very first night of their marriage. When the doors closed and the world outside faded, Peter seemed distant, almost detached. Their wedding night had been brief, leaving Amaka feeling more alone than ever. At first she brushed it off, thinking he was tired. But as days turned into weeks, she realized this was not just a phase. It was their reality. Amaka tried everything to bridge the gap between them. She prepared his favorite meals, wearing nothing but an apron in the hopes of sparking his interest. She spent hours choosing lingerie that accentuated her curves, standing in front of the mirror to ensure she looked perfect. But Peter barely looked up from his phone, dismissing her efforts with comments like, "Don't you feel cold?" Or, "Not now, Amaka, I'm busy." Each rejection chipped away at her confidence. Amaka began to feel invisible in her own home. Her reflection in the mirror showing a woman who felt unloved and undesired. The silence between them grew louder, and the nights became lonelier. Peter's priorities seemed clear: his business and maintaining their image as the perfect couple. But for Amaka, marriage was supposed to be more than just appearances. She wanted passion, love, and intimacy. It was during this time of growing frustration that Amaka began to notice Khalifa, their 29-year-old gateman. Khalifa was dark-skinned, tall and muscular, with short-cropped hair and a neatly trimmed beard. Unlike Peter, who barely acknowledged her presence, Khalifa greeted her warmly every morning. "Good morning, madam. How is everything?" he would ask, his deep voice carrying a quiet charm. His shy smile and kind eyes brought a small flicker of warmth to Amaka's otherwise cold days. One sunny afternoon, Amaka watched from the window as Khalifa crouched beside Peter's luxury SUV, changing a flat tire. His shirt clung to his broad chest, soaked with sweat that glistened under the sunlight. Each muscle in his arms flexed as he worked, and Amaka couldn't help but notice how effortlessly strong he looked. For the first time in months, she felt something stir inside her, a warmth she hadn't felt since her wedding day. At first, Amaka tried to dismiss her feelings, convincing herself it was harmless admiration. But as the days went by, she found herself seeking out moments to interact with Khalifa. She began noticing the small things about him: the way he moved, his quiet attentiveness, and how he was always quick to respond to her requests. Khalifa filled a void that Peter had left behind, and Amaka found herself drawn to him in ways she couldn't explain. One day, the gas cylinder knob in the kitchen got stuck, and Amaka called out for Khalifa. When he didn't answer, she walked to his quarters at the far end of the compound. The sun beat down on her bare shoulders as she knocked on his door. The faint sound of running water came from inside, and she realized he was in the shower. The door was slightly ajar, and curiosity whispered in her ear. For a moment, she hesitated, but her feet betrayed her resolve. She peeked through the gap, and what she saw left her breathless. Khalifa stood under the stream of water, his skin glistening as droplets ran down his broad shoulders and defined abs. Amaka quickly backed away, her heart pounding in her chest. By the time she returned to the main house, her face was flushed, and her thoughts were a whirlwind of guilt and longing. That evening, as she lay in bed beside Peter, who was engrossed in his phone, Amaka stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying the image of Khalifa. For the first time, she questioned whether her longing for connection might lead her down a path she never imagined taking. Amaka couldn't ignore the feeling stirring within her every time she saw Khalifa. He was the opposite of her husband, Peter, in every way. Where Peter was cold and dismissive, Khalifa was warm and attentive. As the days passed, Amaka found herself drawn to him, despite knowing it was wrong. This forbidden attraction felt like a lifeline in the emptiness of her marriage. One quiet afternoon, as Khalifa carried groceries into the kitchen, Amaka stood watching him. She admired his strength, the way his shirt clung to his muscular frame, and the ease with which he completed tasks. Gathering her courage, she approached him. "Khalifa," she said softly, her voice carrying a tone of appreciation. He turned to face her, his expression calm but curious. "Yes, madam," he replied, his deep voice steady. Amaka smiled, trying to keep her tone casual. "I just wanted to thank you for everything you do around here. You're always so helpful." "It's my job, madam," Khalifa responded, with a shy smile, bowing his head slightly. Yet, even in his modesty, there was an undeniable charm that lingered in the air between them. In the following days, Amaka found herself making excuses to interact with Khalifa more often. Whether it was offering him a cold drink or asking for help with minor tasks, she sought his presence at every opportunity. These moments became a source of comfort for her, filling the emotional void left by Peter. But with each passing day, the tension between them grew. One evening, Amaka stepped out into the garden as Khalifa was fixing a broken hose. She wore a silk robe that swayed lightly in the breeze, and her hair cascaded over her shoulders. "Khalifa," she called out softly, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked up, startled, and quickly stood. "Madam, do you need something?" he asked politely, his eyes filled with concern. Amaka hesitated for a moment before stepping closer. "Yes," she said firmly, her voice trembling slightly. "I need you." Khalifa froze, his expression shifting to one of confusion. "Madame, I don't understand," he stammered, taking a step back. Amaka's gaze locked onto his, her voice pleading. "I see the way you look at me," she said, "and I know you feel it too. Khalifa, I need you. Please don't say no." Khalifa shook his head, his voice quiet but firm. "Madam, this is wrong. You are married to Olga Pater. I can't..." He trailed off, his words catching in his throat. Amaka stepped even closer, her desperation evident. "Peter doesn't care about me," she said, her voice cracking. "I've been invisible to him for months. You're the only one who sees me, Khalifa. You're the only one who makes me feel alive." Khalifa's breath quickened as Amaka reached out, her fingers brushing against his chest. He tried to step back, but her words stopped him. "Please," she whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I need this. I need you." For a moment, Khalifa stood frozen, torn between his morals and the undeniable connection he felt with Amaka. Finally, he gave in, his resistance crumbling. His lips met hers in a moment of passion that seemed to erase all reason. What began as a hesitant kiss quickly turned into something deeper, something that neither of them could control. That night, Amaka and Khalifa crossed a line they could never uncross. For the first time in years, Amaka felt alive, cherished, and seen. Khalifa, though racked with guilt, couldn't deny the fire that Amaka ignited in him. Their affair began, a dangerous secret that bound them together while threatening to unravel everything. Yet even in her moments of happiness, Amaka couldn't shake the guilt that loomed over her. She knew the path she was on was dangerous, but she was willing to risk it all to feel alive again. Weeks turned into months, and Amaka's secret affair with Khalifa grew deeper. Each stolen moment with him was a reprieve from the coldness she faced in her marriage. Khalifa, though initially hesitant, found himself captivated by Amaka. Her beauty, her vulnerability, and the way she looked at him made it impossible to stay away. Their passion burned brightly, but beneath the surface, guilt and fear brewed. Amaka tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. She continued attending social events with Peter, putting on the mask of a happy wife. Peter, preoccupied with his business ventures, remained oblivious to her growing distance. Yet, cracks began to show in their seemingly perfect life. Everything changed when Amaka started feeling unwell. Mornings were the worst. Nausea and fatigue left her drained. After days of ignoring the symptoms, she decided to visit a doctor. The news she received made her heart race. She was pregnant. As she sat in the doctor's office, her hands trembled. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. Was the child Peter's or Khalifa's? Her mind raced, replaying the moments that led to this. She decided to keep the truth hidden, at least for now. When she returned home, Peter was waiting for her in the living room, his eyes lighting up as she walked in. "Amaka, where have you been?" he asked, his tone unusually soft. "I wasn't feeling well," she replied, trying to steady her voice. Peter frowned, but quickly brushed it off. "I hope you're okay. You've been looking tired lately." Amaka hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Peter, I have something to tell you," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air for a moment before Peter's face broke into a wide smile. "Amaka, this is amazing news," he exclaimed, pulling her into an embrace. For the first time in months, she saw genuine happiness in his eyes. Peter immediately began making plans, calling friends and family to share the announcement. But while Peter celebrated, Amaka's heart was heavy with guilt. The question of paternity haunted her. She avoided Khalifa, unsure of how to face him with this news. However, fate had other plans. During a grand baby shower Peter organized at a 5-star venue, the whispers began. Guests marveled at the opulence, praising Peter for his generosity and Amaka for her radiant glow. But as the weeks turned into months and her pregnancy progressed, the comments became less kind. When the twins were born, the stark differences in their appearances fueled speculation. One child was a spitting image of Peter, fair-skinned, with his sharp jawline and piercing eyes. The other child, however, had Khalifa's features. Darker skin, fuller lips, and a broad nose. The whispers in the neighborhood grew louder, spreading like wildfire. Visitors couldn't help but remark on the difference between the boys. During one casual gathering, a neighbor said with a laugh, One of your sons looks just like Khalifa, your gateman. Though the comment was made in jest, it struck a nerve. That night, Peter confronted Amaka. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with suspicion. "Amaka?" he began, closing the bedroom door behind him. "Why does one of our sons look so different from the other?" Amaka froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She forced a smile and said, "They're twins, Peter. Not all twins are identical." Peter's gaze didn't waver. "This isn't about them being identical, Amaka. People are talking. I'm asking you, why does one of our sons look nothing like me?" Amaka's hand trembled as she fiddled with the hem of her dress. "You're overthinking this, Peter. Genetics can be unpredictable." Peter's voice dropped, his tone now low and dangerous. "I want a DNA test tomorrow." Amaka's breath hitched as panic surged through her. A DNA test? The carefully constructed walls around her secret began to crumble. She nodded weakly, unable to find the words to respond. As Peter turned away, his jaw clenched in frustration, Amaka realized there was no escaping the truth. The life she had built was on the verge of collapsing, and she had no idea how to stop it. If this captivating tale resonated with you, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe for more enthralling stories. Stay tuned as the adventure escalates.